For years, Pronunciation Book was one of the most boring channels on YouTube. Beginning in 2010, it uploaded hundreds of short videos teaching viewers how to pronounce English words and phrases. White background, black text, the same calm male voice. Nothing about it looked like horror. Then, in April 2012, something slipped through. A video called How to Ask for Help in English repeated a much stranger phrase.
Help me. Help me.
Please help me escape from this place. Other uploads mentioned someone trying to communicate and not being heard. Then the channel returned to normal, almost as if nothing had happened. On July 9, 2013, the normality broke completely. A video called How to Pronounce 77 did not teach pronunciation at all. Instead, the voice announced that something was going to happen in 77 days. The next day became 76, then 75. Every upload contained cryptic sentences followed by the same countdown. Faint clicking sounds appeared at the end, and when viewers pushed them through spectrographs, they believed they could see part of a propaganda-style image. That was enough to make the internet paranoid. 4chan users built a research document dozens of pages long. People compared weather, background sirens, domain registrations, and old videos. Some theorized that the channel was an ARG or viral marketing campaign. Others went darker. A modern number station, covert intelligence communication, government brainwashing, a resistance trying to transmit information, even a warning for an approaching terrorist attack. None of those darker explanations had solid evidence behind them, but the countdown made every meaningless detail feel temporarily important. For a while, I think the most disturbing theory would have been that someone was actually trapped behind the channel. Maybe the strange sentences were not fictional dialogue at all. Maybe the normal pronunciation videos had been camouflage, and only occasionally could the speaker say what he really meant. Please help me escape from this place becomes very different if you believe the person saying it cannot speak freely. But then investigators started finding something much more mundane. Domain records and previous projects pointed toward Thomas Bender and Jacob Bakala. Daily Dot journalist Kevin Morris contacted Bakala weeks before the countdown ended, and Bakila confirmed that he and Bender were involved. Pronunciation Book had originally been built as an inexpensive viral marketing concept capable of generating organic search traffic. A script reportedly scraped search suggestions for things people wanted to know how to pronounce, allowing the channel to look genuinely useful while slowly accumulating an audience. The terrifying transmitter was an art project. On September 24, when the countdown finally reached 0, Pronunciation Book connected itself to another famous internet mystery. Horse eBooks, a Twitter account many people believed was an accidental poetry-generating spam bot. In reality, Bakila had been operating it as part of a conceptual art project. Both mysteries fed into the interactive project Bear Stearns Bravo, created by Bakila and Bender.
This is Bear Stearns we're talking about here. The profits are big, the suits are cut sharp. Be prepared for anything, even non-standard filing protocols.
So the spies were not real. The terrorist warning was not real. Nobody had been secretly begging to escape. But I think one darker idea survives the reveal. Pronunciation Book spent years teaching people what normal looked like. Then it changed one rule. A harmless voice became threatening.
Help me. Help me.
Static became a code. Random sentences became evidence. A countdown created urgency, and the audience supplied the paranoia. The creators did not have to convince thousands of people that something horrifying was hidden inside the channel. They only had to make them believe there might be. And once that happened, the internet did the rest. Number 2. A cassette recorded from Brazilian radio in the early 1990s contained a song with no known name, no confirmed artist, and apparently no way back to whoever created it. For years, people on the internet knew it as Fond My Mind, but almost immediately I ran into a problem that probably wasn't its name. The recording came from a Brazilian listener known as Gaybor72. who reportedly taped the song from radio around 1993. When the recording eventually reached the internet, listeners tried transcribing the chorus themselves. "Fond My Mind" was one interpretation, and at first, that seemed like the obvious place to start. If those really were the lyrics, maybe searching them would reveal the song. If not, perhaps the singer's accent could tell us where they came from. People compared the track to synth pop and new wave, proposed different countries, artists, and possible lyrics. I found myself thinking the radio station might be the key. Identify the station, find its old playlists, and suddenly this anonymous recording has a paper trail, except every step depended on information we didn't have. And the more I looked at the cassette itself, the stranger that became. Because the song wasn't actually lost. We could listen to it. The melody survived. The singer's voice survived. The instruments survived. What was missing was everything surrounding them. Then the search produced something much more promising. The investigation eventually converged on Brazilian musician Ede Edman and a recording called "Feels Like a Wish." For a moment, that sounds like the end. We found the title. We found people connected to it. Mystery solved. But this was where I started becoming more cautious rather than less. Because identifying something and proving its provenance aren't quite the same thing. You still have to connect the recording to the people claiming it, establish when it was created, and make the chronology agree with the cassette that started the entire search. And while following that problem, I started wondering whether I'd been thinking about "Fond My Mind" backwards. Maybe the mystery was never how a song disappeared. Maybe it was how a song could survive after its identity disappeared. Think about the chain required for us to hear it today. Someone created the recording. A radio station broadcast it. One listener happened to record that broadcast onto cassette. The cassette survived for decades. Then a copy reached the internet. Every one of those things had to happen. But the artist's name only had to be lost once. And suddenly, the entire rabbit hole looked different to me. The cassette wasn't evidence of destruction. It was evidence of survival. An incomplete kind of survival, where the artifact outlives the information necessary to understand it. Even the name "Fond My Mind" becomes unsettling when you look at it that way. It wasn't necessarily something the artist ever called the song. It was something we called it because we couldn't understand what the singer was saying. A temporary interpretation became a title. The internet had begun constructing a second identity for a song whose first identity had disappeared. And that leaves me with the part of this story I find hardest to shake. "Fond My Mind" was fortunate. Someone kept the cassette, someone uploaded it. Other people cared enough to investigate it. Eventually, the search converged strongly around "Feels Like a Wish" and the people behind the recording. But imagine all the tapes where that chain breaks. Unlabeled cassettes in boxes. Local broadcasts whose station logs were discarded. Demo recordings whose musicians have died. Songs that still physically exist somewhere, perfectly playable, with no surviving information explaining who made them. Nothing sinister had to happen to erase those people. No conspiracy. No deliberate destruction. Sometimes the recording simply survives longer than the memory attached to it. And after following "Fond My Mind," that possibility bothers me more than the idea of a song being lost. Because somewhere, there could be another cassette just like this one. You could put it into a player right now. You could hear someone's voice. You could hear something they created 30 years ago. And you might be one of the last people who ever hears them without ever knowing who they were. Number 3. There is something deeply wrong with the face of Jeff the Killer. But I don't mean the eyes or the impossible smile. I mean that after more than 20 years, we still don't know whose face we're looking at. The image was already circulating before the famous creepypasta. Researchers have traced early versions to the Japanese website paya.cc in 2005, where altered forms of the face appeared under names like "white powder," By 2007, the image even appeared briefly in the Japanese horror video NNN special broadcast. So I initially thought this would be straightforward. Find the oldest upload, then keep moving backward until we reach the photograph before someone edited it. Except the further backward people went, the less stable the story became. One explanation spread for years. The person was supposedly a girl named Katie Robinson, whose photograph had been mocked online before she died by suicide. It's horrifying. It also appears to be false. The Katie story became one of several supposed origins that investigators eventually rejected. Other photographs have surfaced claiming to be the original. Some looked disturbingly plausible. Others were reconstructions or outright fakes. And this is where I started wondering if the search itself had become part of the problem, because everyone knows what they're trying to find. A human face resembling Jeff. That expectation creates a trap. Give me a photograph with the right angle, dark hair, pale skin, and similar proportions, and suddenly I can start convincing myself that I see Jeff underneath it. Then somebody enhances it. Someone else overlays the famous image, the eyes line up, the mouth almost fits, and a possibility starts turning into the original. Until somebody traces that photograph and the theory collapses. Again, the earliest known Jeff images don't solve this. They only move us closer to whatever came before. And that changed the question for me. Maybe we're not searching for the original Jeff, the killer image. We're searching for the last moment when this image was still a photograph of an ordinary person. Imagine that transformation. Someone takes a normal picture. It gets uploaded somewhere. Someone edits the face. Another person edits that edit. The image crosses websites, languages, and communities. Files are resized, not Naparutu disappears. Old pages die. Eventually, the derivative becomes vastly more famous than its source, and the person underneath it becomes almost irrelevant. That's the theory I keep coming back to. There may not have been one clean transformation from original photograph Jeff. There could have been intermediate versions we haven't recovered. If that's true, even finding the person might not reconstruct the lineage. We could find a photograph that resembles the face perfectly and still be missing the edit that actually produced Jeff. As of now, the completely unedited source remains unresolved, while communities dedicated to the search continue cataloging and disproving candidates. And that's what makes this image disturbing to me now. Not the fictional murderer. Not go to sleep. The unsettling part is that millions of people recognize this face instantly, while the real face beneath it may have been erased by the very thing that made it immortal. Somewhere in the history of the internet, there may have been an ordinary photograph of an ordinary person. Then the copies outlived the context, the monster survived, and the human being disappeared. Number 4. For years, people searched for a lost SpongeBob movie that appeared to have everything a real movie should have. A title, a poster, a plot's synopsis, a distributor, even an Amazon listing. It was called A Day with SpongeBob SquarePants, the movie, an unauthorized live-action mockumentary, supposedly intended for DVD around 2011. And when I first looked at the evidence, I understood why people thought there had to be a movie somewhere. The plot was strangely specific. SpongeBob supposedly lived above ground like a Hollywood celebrity. Worried that he was becoming irrelevant, his boss organized a contest, allowing one child to spend a day with him. A boy named Seth wins. And everything begins going wrong. This wasn't somebody vaguely remembering a childhood movie. There were commercial traces of it. So when Lost Media Wiki users began investigating, the obvious theory was simple. The movie was made, then buried. Maybe Nickelodeon intervened because it was unauthorized. Maybe legal threats prevented its release. Maybe copies existed privately. And that theory becomes surprisingly easy to believe when you're staring at something that looks like a DVD cover for a movie you cannot watch. But then I started noticing something uncomfortable. Almost every trail led back to the same place. Regal Films. The company connected to the project had promoted the film, and the proposed distributor was MVD. Yet, despite years of searching, investigators weren't uncovering footage. No trailer, no leaked scene, no production stills demonstrating that filming had actually happened. The absence alone proves nothing. But eventually, investigators learned something that changed the entire shape of the mystery. According to the production history later documented by Lost Media Wiki, the project had not reached the stage people assumed. The creator had pitched the concept to Regal Films. A cover was produced, and Regal reportedly placed it on Amazon to measure interest through pre-orders. The project even received a barcode. But production costs became a problem. The movie wasn't secretly completed and then erased. It apparently wasn't produced. And that's where I think this case becomes much stranger than an ordinary lost film, because I had been treating the Amazon listing as evidence that a movie existed. But what if it was evidence of something earlier, an intention? A product page describing an artifact that reality hadn't caught up with yet. Once that page entered the internet's permanent memory, the distinction became almost invisible. People weren't searching for nothing. They were searching for something with a title, artwork, synopsis, release information, and corporate history. Everything except the film. And that creates a category of lost media I find genuinely unsettling. Media that leaves evidence of its existence before it exists. Imagine finding an old DVD listing 20 years from now. The company is gone. The websites are dead. The people involved are unreachable. You find a cover, a barcode, and a release date. How long would you search before, considering that there might never have been anything behind them? That's what happened here. The investigation didn't recover A Day with SpongeBob SquarePants. It recovered the history of why there was nothing to recover. And somehow, that feels stranger, because the internet didn't preserve a lost movie. It preserved something that looked almost exactly like the ghost of one.